30 cents. That is how much gasoline prices rose in the United States in a single week. Not a month, not a quarter, 7 days. NPR reported yesterday that the average cost of regular gas as of Sunday is 4.446 per gallon. 1 week ago, it was 4.099. On February 26th, 2 days before the war in Iran began, gas was $2.98. A year ago, it was $3.17. The national average is now 50% higher, nearly $1.50 more per gallon than it was 65 days ago. And it is still climbing. Fox Business reported on May 2nd that analysts are forecasting $5 a gallon gas by Memorial Day. The AIA confirmed it was the highest price ever recorded for that date. And I want you to understand what I just said. This is not the highest gas price of the year. This is the highest gas price ever recorded for May 2nd in the history of the AIA tracking gasoline costs in the United States. Every May 2nd that has ever existed in America had cheaper gas than right now. And Memorial Day is 24 days away, and the summer driving season has not even started. And Macquarie Group, a major Australian financial firm, warned that if the war extends to the summer, oil prices could hit $200 per barrel, which could push pump prices to as much as $7 per gallon. They assigned a 40% probability to that outcome, not 5%. Not a fringe scenario, 40%. A 2 in 5 chance that the gas pump you're standing at right now will read $7 per gallon before September. And the reason I am making this video tonight is that gas prices are not rising by the week anymore. They are rising by the day, 5 to 10 cents per gallon per day according to multiple tracking sources. Which means every tank you do not fill tonight will cost you more tomorrow morning. And if that sounds alarmist, go look at your GasBuddy app right now. Pull it up on your phone, look at the prices near you. Then come back tomorrow morning and look again. The number will be higher. And the day after that, higher still. And by Memorial Day, the number on that pump is going to make you physically sick. And I want to put the velocity of this price increase in context that makes the scale of it unmistakable. Gas prices have risen $1.16 per gallon since the war started on February 28th. In 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, gas prices took approximately 4 months to rise from $3.50 to $5.01 at their June peak, an increase of $1.51 over 120 days. This time, gas has risen $1.50 in 65 days. The rate of increase in 2026 is nearly double the rate of increase during the Ukraine crisis. And the Ukraine crisis did not involve the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. It involved sanctions and voluntary boycotts. This crisis involves the physical blockade of 20% of the world's oil supply through a waterway that Iran has mined. That Iran is charging $1 million per vessel to transit, and that the U.S. Navy is now attempting to clear with minesweepers, while the IRGC threatens a severe response to any military vessel that approaches. The supply disruption in 2022 was partial and voluntary. The supply disruption in 2026 is total and enforced by naval mines and missile batteries. That is why the price is rising faster. And that is why the analysts who are forecasting $5 by Memorial Day and $7 by summer are not being alarmist. They are being mathematical. Gas rose $1.50 in 65 days and diesel is approaching the all-time record set during the Ukraine crisis. Beyond gasoline, the fuel that actually runs the American economy is in even worse shape. Diesel has climbed to $5.64 per gallon nationally, up approximately $2.09 from a year ago. The all-time record for diesel in the United States was $5.81 per gallon, set in June of 2022 during the worst of the Ukraine-Russia energy crisis. Diesel is now 17 cents from breaking that record, 17 cents. At the current rate of daily increases, diesel will set a new all-time record price before the end of this month. And I cannot overstate what diesel does to the cost of everything you buy in America. Every single product on every single shelf in every single grocery store, hardware store, clothing store, pharmacy, and big box retailer in the United States was delivered there by a truck that runs on diesel. Rob Handfield, an NC State professor of supply chain management, told WRAL that diesel is hit harder and that the consumer ultimately pays for it because of transportation surcharges and fuel surcharges that trucks pass on in the form of higher prices for groceries, sundry goods, and everything else. When diesel was $3.50 per gallon, the average cost to ship a full truckload from Los Angeles to New York was approximately $6.800. When diesel is $5.64, that same shipment costs approximately $9,400. That is a $2,600 increase per truck per trip. And that $2,600 does not come out of the trucking company's profit margin. It comes out of your grocery bill, your pharmacy bill, your Home Depot bill. Every delivery to every store in America just got $600 per truck more expensive. And the consumer is the person who absorbs that cost in higher shelf prices. And Handfield warned of something that should terrify every American who depends on stable prices for anything. He said there is a possibility this could actually last longer than 2026 because a lot of the oil infrastructure was damaged during the war, and it takes a long time to rebuild these facilities. He projected 3 to 5 years of oil shortages and elevated gas prices. 3 to 5 years. If Handfield is right, the $4.45 you are paying today is not a spike. It is the new floor, and the floor is still rising. California is already above $6, and the Midwest just saw the fastest weekly spike in modern history. U.S. News and World Report documented on May 1st that the price disparity across the country is staggering, but the direction is uniform. California drivers are paying an average of $6.06 per gallon, up nearly 3% from just 1 week ago. Hawaii is at $5.64. Washington State is at $5.61. Oregon is at $5.21. Nevada is at $5.15. 5 states are already above $5 per gallon. And the analysts who are forecasting $5 nationally by Memorial Day are forecasting $7 or higher for California, Hawaii, and the Pacific Northwest by the peak of summer driving season in July and August. But here is the part that should stop you cold. The Midwest, which has traditionally been the cheapest fuel region in America, just experienced the most violent weekly price spike in modern memory. Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan saw gas prices increase between 22% and nearly 30% in a single month. In all 3 states, the price of a gallon of gas jumped by approximately $1 in 4 weeks. $1 in 4 weeks. Illinois is at $4.93. The Midwest is not cheap anymore. And the South, which has been the last bastion of sub-$4 gasoline, is closing that gap rapidly. Florida is at $4.34. Texas is at $3.92 and climbing. Georgia is at $3.85 and climbing. At current daily rates of increase, every southern state will be above $4 before the end of May. There is nowhere in America to hide from this. You cannot drive to the cheap state anymore because the cheap state is not cheap. The gap between the most expensive state and the least expensive state has compressed because the underlying cause, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the loss of 20% of global oil supply, affects every gallon of gasoline in America regardless of which state it is sold in. State gas taxes and refinery blend requirements create local variation. But the base price of crude oil is global. And the global base price is being set by a war that has shut down the most important shipping lane on Earth. And what happened in the Midwest this past month deserves its own examination, because it reveals how fast this crisis can metastasize into regions that thought they were insulated. Michigan drivers actually saw a decrease in their gas price averages in early April. People in Michigan were feeling relief. And then in 4 weeks, the price reversed and climbed by approximately $1 per gallon. That is a whiplash event that no household budget can absorb gracefully. A family in Michigan that drives 2 cars and fills each tank once a week went from paying approximately $50 per fill-up to $66 per fill-up in 28 days. That is $32 per week in additional fuel costs, $128 per month, $1,536 per year. For a family earning $60, $0 in the Midwest. That is 2.5% of gross income consumed by a single commodity price in a single month. And the EIA's original forecast for annual average retail gas was $3.34 per gallon. At that price, a 2-car family spends approximately $4,400 per year on fuel. At current prices, they are spending $7,400. At $6, they will spend $9,984. The difference between the EIA's pre-war forecast and the $6 scenario is approximately $5. $500 per year in additional fuel costs per two-car household alone. Every expert says prices will remain high even after the war ends, and here is exactly why. Patrick DeHaan, GasBuddy's head of petroleum analysis, warned that $4 per gallon breaches a psychological wall for American consumers. He described the situation as highly volatile and unpredictable, and Michael Mischie, a supply chain expert and professor at the University of Southern California, delivered the sentence that best describes the fuel price trajectory in America right now. He told Fox Business that prices go up like rockets, and they come down like a feather. That feather metaphor is the thing Americans need to understand before they make any financial decision for the rest of the year. Even if the war ends tomorrow, even if the Strait of Hormuz is reopened this week, even if every tanker currently stuck in the Gulf resumes transit by Friday, gasoline prices will not drop back to $2.98 overnight. They will not drop to $2.98 next month. They may not drop to $2.98 this year. The reasons are structural, not political. First, more than 80 energy facilities across the Gulf were damaged during the fighting, and the IEA estimated that more than a third were severely damaged. Qatar's Ras Laffan LNG complex, the largest liquefaction facility on Earth responsible for 20% of global LNG production, was hit by Iranian missile strikes on March 18th, causing a 17% reduction in capacity that will take 3 to 5 years to fully repair. Saudi Arabia's largest refinery was targeted. Pipelines across Iraq and Kuwait were damaged or destroyed. That infrastructure damage means the physical capacity to produce and export oil from the Gulf has been reduced even if the political will to resume production exists. Second, maritime insurance costs for tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz have exploded. Before the war, insuring a tanker through the strait was a routine cost built into the price of every barrel. Now, the risk premium has been multiplied by a factor that makes some routes economically unviable regardless of whether the strait is technically open. Third, Iran has seized 3 cargo ships and has begun charging tolls of over $1 million per vessel for passage through waters it claims sovereignty over. That toll, if it becomes permanent, adds a per barrel cost to every tanker that transits the strait that did not exist before February 28th. Fourth, governments around the world are hoarding oil. The IEA coordinated a 400 million barrel release from strategic reserves in March, the largest in the agency's history, and countries are now racing to refill those reserves at current elevated prices. That refilling demand keeps oil prices elevated because strategic buyers are competing with commercial buyers for the same reduced supply. Every barrel purchased to refill a strategic reserve is a barrel that is not available to be refined into gasoline for your car. And fifth, the refinery capacity in the United States was already running at approximately 90% utilization before the war began. No new greenfield refineries have been built in America since 1977. The existing refinery fleet is aging, maintenance-intensive, and configured for crude grades that are no longer flowing at normal volumes because the imports from the Gulf that those refineries were designed to process are stuck behind the Hormuz blockade. American refineries can process domestic shale oil, but the light sweet crude from the Permian Basin produces a different product mix than the heavy sour crude from the Gulf. Specifically, light sweet crude produces more gasoline and less diesel per barrel, while heavy sour crude produces more diesel. The disruption of heavy sour crude imports is part of why diesel prices are rising faster than gasoline prices. The refineries that were built to make diesel from Gulf crude cannot efficiently make diesel from Permian crude. The infrastructure mismatch means that even though America is the world's largest oil producer, it cannot refine its way out of a diesel shortage using only domestic crude. And the diesel shortage is the price transmission mechanism that pushes every other consumer price higher, because every product moves by diesel truck at some point in its supply chain. The structural damage to global oil infrastructure, the insurance repricing, the Iranian toll system, the strategic reserve hoarding, and the American refinery mismatch are 5 independent factors that will keep fuel prices elevated for months or years after any ceasefire takes effect. The war broke things that cannot be fixed by a peace agreement. The peace agreement, if it ever comes, stops the breaking. It does not undo the damage that has already occurred. Jet fuel spiked 95% and your flight ticket just became the most expensive domestic purchase you will make this year. Jet fuel in North America has spiked 95% since the war began, according to data compiled in the Global Fuel Crisis Tracking. That is a near doubling of the most significant cost line item in airline operations. Airlines have responded by raising prices for checked baggage, reducing flight frequencies on marginal routes, and passing fuel surcharges through to ticket prices that are now materially higher than they were 60 days ago. If you have summer travel planned, if you booked a flight for June or July at a price you found reasonable in January, understand that the airline is now eating a fuel cost that has nearly doubled since you booked. They will recover that cost, either through fare increases on new bookings, through reduced service on your route, through checked bag fee increases, or through fuel surcharges that appear as separate line items on your receipt. And the shipping services that deliver every package to your door have already responded. The United States Postal Service, Amazon, and FedEx implemented fuel surcharges in March. Those surcharges are being passed directly to sellers, who pass them to consumers in the form of higher prices or higher shipping fees. Every package you order online now costs more to deliver than it did on February 27th. And because the fuel surcharges are percentage-based, they scale with the price of fuel. As diesel and jet fuel continue to rise, the surcharges rise proportionally. The online shopping economy, which 79% of Americans participate in, has been quietly repriced by the war without most consumers noticing, because the surcharge is embedded in the final checkout price rather than displayed as a separate line item. You are already paying the war tax on every Amazon order. You just do not see it itemized on the receipt. Morgan Stanley documented the dollar losing 10%, and that makes your gas even more expensive than the pump price shows. NPR reported yesterday that the U.S. dollar depreciated approximately 10% from early January 2025 to the end of April 2026, with losses in the first half of 2025 being the biggest since 1973. Morgan Stanley's analysis confirmed the decline. And a weaker dollar makes gas more expensive in a way that most Americans do not understand, because oil is priced globally in dollars. When the dollar weakens by 10%, the effective purchasing power of every dollar you spend at the gas pump declines by 10% relative to the global price of crude. Even if oil prices were flat, a 10% decline in the dollar would push gas prices approximately 10% higher for American consumers. But oil prices are not flat. They have risen more than 35% from pre-war levels. So the American consumer is being hit by two forces simultaneously. The price of oil is rising because of the war, and the value of the dollars you are using to buy that oil is falling because of the macroeconomic consequences of the war. The tariffs, the debt, and the fiscal trajectory that prompted 3 credit rating downgrades. You are paying more dollars for a product that costs more in every currency. The double hit means that the $4.45 you see on the pump today has less purchasing power than the $4.45 that the pump showed in July 2022, when gas hit its previous inflation-adjusted peak. In real terms, adjusted for the dollar's decline, today's gas price is functionally equivalent to approximately $4.90 in 2022 dollars. You are paying more for gas right now than Americans paid at the absolute peak of the post-Ukraine energy crisis. And the peak of this crisis has not arrived yet. It arrives in the summer, when seasonal driving demand adds 20 to 40 cents per gallon on top of whatever the war and the strait, and the infrastructure damage and the dollar decline have already done to the base price. Filling your tank right now versus filling it in 3 weeks could save you $30 to $50, and here is the math. An average American car has a 16-gallon fuel tank. At $4.45 per gallon, filling from empty to full costs $71.20. If gas reaches $5 per gallon by Memorial Day, which is the median analyst forecast, that same fill-up costs $80. If gas reaches $5.50 by the end of June, which is consistent with the continued daily increases at current rates, the fill-up costs $88. If gas reaches $6 nationally by July, which is what happens if oil crosses $120 per barrel as analysts at Goldman Sachs and others have modeled. The fill-up costs $96. And if Macquarie's $7 per gallon scenario materializes, which they assign a 40% probability, filling your car costs $112. The difference between filling your tank tonight at $4.45 and filling it in July at $6 is $24.80 per tank. If you drive the average American mileage of 14.0 miles per year and get 25 miles per gallon, you fill your tank approximately 35 times per year. At $4.45, that is $2,492 per year. At $6, that is $3,360 per year. At $7, that is $3,920 per year. The difference between today's price and the Macquarie High scenario is $1.428 per year in additional fuel costs for a single vehicle. For a two-car household, that is $2,856 per year in additional gasoline costs alone, not counting the downstream inflation in groceries, shipping, airfare, utilities, and every other product and service that is priced off the cost of fuel. And every one of those downstream increases has a lag, which means the $4.45 you see at the pump today is already baked into future grocery prices, future delivery fees, future utility rates, and future service costs that will arrive at your household in June, July, and August regardless of what happens to the pump price in the interim. You are not just paying $4.45 for gas today. You are prepaying for the cascade of price increases that $4.45 gas will generate across every other category of consumer spending for the next 90 to 120 days. The pump price is the leading indicator, everything else follows. And everything else will follow at higher levels than you have seen since the summer of 2022. And possibly higher than any American has seen in their lifetime if the war extends through the summer and the strait remains closed, and the infrastructure damage proves as durable as the NC State economist and the IEA are both projecting. Trump stated publicly that he is not concerned if gas prices go up, saying if they rise, they rise. The cost of the war has exceeded $200 billion. The arms industry has quadrupled weapons production to sustain the conflict. The EIA's annual average forecast for 2026 retail gas was $3.34 per gallon, published before the war began. That forecast is now a relic from a world that no longer exists. Gas is $4.45 today and climbing. The EIA projected that crude oil prices could push retail gas prices around 60 cents per gallon higher in March, and about 70 cents higher in the second quarter, after which prices would fall back to close to $3 per gallon by year-end. That projection rested on the assumption that transit through the Strait of Hormuz would improve, and that shut-in production would peak in early April. Transit has not improved. Iran seized 3 more cargo ships this week. The ceasefire has not held, shut-in production has not peaked. The EIA baseline is dead. And the replacement forecast, the one that accounts for a sustained closure of the strait, infrastructure damage that takes years to repair, and a summer driving season that adds seasonal demand on top of a supply crisis, has not been officially published because the government shutdown delayed the agencies that would have produced it. So you are flying blind with a gas price that is rising 5 to 10 cents per day. No official updated forecast from the federal agency responsible for energy projections. A war that shows no sign of ending, a ceasefire that collapsed, a naval blockade that is escalating, a strategic petroleum reserve at a 40-year low, diesel approaching the all-time record, jet fuel up 95%, the dollar at a 3-year low, and 24 days until the summer driving season officially begins and adds seasonal demand pressure on top of every single one of those supply-side catastrophes. Fill your tank tonight, you will thank yourself in the morning. And you will thank yourself again in June, and again in July, and again in August. Because the price on that pump tomorrow morning will be higher than the price tonight. And every morning after that for as far as any credible analyst can currently see. And when someone at the gas station next to you says, "I remember when this was $2.98, you can tell them it was 65 days ago, the same car, the same pump, the same gallon. And somehow, in the time it takes to blink in the life of a nation, the price of keeping that car running, became the second largest monthly expense in the average American household after housing. Fill your tank tonight before midnight. Because tomorrow morning that pump is going to show you a number that you will not forget for the rest of the year.